Romanesque furniture is going to take on the attitude that we've seen in some other cultures, something more similar to China than what we might think of as Western ideas of furniture today. What do I mean by that? Well, your typical home in the Romanesque period is going to be a very simple affair. You're going to have a hearth at the center, which means all of the furniture that there is going to be pushed off to the sides. Furniture is also going to be A, expensive, and B, not terribly useful in a society where you might move around a great deal. The higher members of society tend to have multiple homes so that they don't have to worry about moving things. And the lower members of society, well, they generally aren't at home that much. They aren't in the house that often. And when they are, well, they want some mobility, some multi-use to the space, and furniture doesn't often allow for that. So we see very simple, what we might think of as very primitive forms of furniture, very simple tables, benches, and chests. And these are frequently handmade, oftentimes by a homeowner, etc. They're oftentimes going to be customized for this reason, especially amongst the lower classes. So the working class, the lower middle class, you're going to see pieces that are custom made. So a chest that fits in a specific spot, for example. The furniture tends to be very simple and straightforward. We don't see a lot of carving into it. We don't see a lot of really ornate pieces. Makes a lot of sense given the period. We're under the feudal system. People don't have a lot of money. And to that point, we're actually paying rent, for example, in what's called food rent. So your general family, no matter what class, is paying a certain amount of the crops, or the crops that their serfs create, will be paid to the next person up the social hierarchy. So you don't really have money. You don't have a good form of trade. Now, where we do see a lot of very specialized furniture is going to be in the monasteries. They frequently will have a lot of work done, a lot of pieces. This is because typically in Romanesque society, what you're going to see is your firstborn will be married off. Love is not really a thing anyone cares that much about at this time. I hate to say it, but it is the case. Unless you're particularly poor, you're going to be in an arranged marriage. And you're going to be married to someone who can bring land or wealth to the family. So, for example, two families might have side-to-side plots of land, and they marry their firstborns, so that becomes one plot of land. Well, the second-born, of course, can't inherit anything, so they're frequently given to the church. And by given, I mean quite literally, you're going to the church, you don't have a choice, and we're dropping you off at the convent or monastery. But because many of these families, especially wealthy families, feel bad about that, they frequently give a lot of land and money to the monastery, basically to keep their child very comfortable. Consequently, we see lots of furniture custom made for these religious groups. We will also see something called Riven Lumber. Now, riving is splitting of wood in the direction of the long fibers, which results in these wedge-shaped pieces of wood. Now, this is fantastic for certain uses. For example, if I'm building a barrel or something, this might be very useful. But for every other use, it's actually incredibly wasteful because I now have to cut down this piece so that it creates a flat piece of lumber. It creates more work, but we don't have the idea of a modern lumber mill at the time. So you have this extra work that goes into it. And when we look at these average homes, while they don't have a lot of furniture, for example, here, this is surprisingly well appointed, by the way, for a bedroom, but where they lack in furniture, they would make up for in wall hangings. I'm talking about tapestries, embroideries, that sort of thing. We're not doing a lot of paintings at this point in the Romanesque. People are not carrying them around. They're very difficult to work with because they're generally on wood panels. Instead, you use tapestry or embroidery where I can roll it up and move it to another place. It also serves a second purpose. You would cover the walls with tapestries hanging in front of them because it creates dead space behind it. So here we have our tapestry, which will be a wavy line there. Here's my wall. And all of this space in between becomes dead space. Well, in the winter, that creates insulation. And it keeps warm air in, it keeps cold air out. It's really useful to have. And you're going to see this in castles, you're going to see this in churches all the time. So these tapestries are actually serving a functional purpose. The furniture that they have when they do decorate in the Romanesque is often going to be very simple in terms of sculpture. We will see some painting as well, but again, very simple patterns, often based on some religious principle. For example, here we see what appear to be crosses or quadrifoil designs laid out on the form. And we only see 3 colors because, of course, these pigments would be expensive. They'd be hard to find. So you're going to use them very carefully.